Hello, welcome back. I'm Ken. We're visiting with Mike. Lots of good ideas about improving organizations of all sizes and kinds. Mike, where do we go from here?
Well, first, I like to kind of come to the end of the first part of the process, and which essentially deals with how do you get started. Um, and there's probably different alternatives. Nehemiah tackled the whole population of Jerusalem. Then, if you compare that to, say, for instance, Eunice, he started by one group at a time. So you can either go piecemeal or you can go the whole thing. And different people have done that, or a mixed model. An example of that would be Gosen with Nissan and a turnaround. Essentially, he tackled everybody front, center, and then he also set up 10 teams. So he broke up the pieces and made sure that each of the pieces were accountable for what they were responsible for. So there's benefit on each of those alternatives. Personally, when I started doing consulting work, the process that we would follow first was to have an offsite with the key decision maker, the president or general manager of the business that we're involved with. And we would have the staff, and then we would address what are the impediments. So the president or the general manager would verbalize, if there were no constraints, what would we look like? What could we be? Where's the promised land? Where's the milk and honey? And then what's stopping us from getting there? So we would go through maybe a couple of hours listing all the different kinds of things that people saw that were impediments. And we had one basic ground rule is you can ask questions, but we don't debate or disagree with somebody's perspective. If they think it's a problem, then it is a problem. So we would go through that. And then after that, we would recycle back and say, okay, what are we going to do about it? And there, essentially, we laid out the process, which we call the fast start, which was our action plans. And there, for everything that was being mentioned, who does this? Who owns the issue? So we're essentially clarifying what the responsibilities were. It's kind of interesting because at the beginning, some of those guys are, I don't know if I want that, and yet that's their job, So you can see where the organization is kind of in the molasses, not moving forward very fast when there is no ownership. So the key thing is ownership. Who's going to do it? And then what are the steps that you plan to do? And when is it going to happen? And it's not big projects, but step-by-step stuff so that you could monitor the progress as it went along. And you see a little bit of that with Nehemiah when he talks about they had achieved to build a wall to have the height of what it ought to be, kind of thing. So, it was very obvious because everybody could see. And there was accountability because everybody knew that this section is yours, or boy, this section is mine, and I better do what I'm supposed to do. So you had accountability. And then the other thing also is that a big challenge is in organizations, people or managers push the decision to their boss, kind of thing. And when they ought to be tackling the thing, it's not the boss to figure out what needs to be done. It's your job to figure it out and approach the boss and say, this is what the situation is. This is what I propose to do. So there's a concept called subsidiarity, which essentially says that the decisions have to be taken at the lowest level in the organization, close to where the work is being done or where the effect is supposed to take place. So you have, like Nehemiah, again, the same thing of subsidiarity, because each of the families or each of the different groups, because not only there were families, but there were neighboring towns that were in there helping, and there were trades group that took some sections. So whoever you are, you owned it, and you have to figure out how to do it. So that's one thing that I find fascinating, and no matter which of the turnarounds we look at, they all have that aspect of pushing the management down to the level where the people have to handle the situations that they've been charged with. And that's a major issue I found at least in all the companies that I've been involved with. And the problem is bosses tend to become overloaded, for one thing. And two is they don't do what they're supposed to do. So they get distracted in doing the things that their subordinates should be doing, which is not a healthy situation either. So anyway, that's one aspect of you can see in setting up how we're going to go about doing it. So either by small group and starting, like for instance, there's a guy called Maxwell who wrote a book and he talks about turning point. And the advantage of that is if you build a certain momentum with a small group, which is manageable, and people see the results, then people say, hey, I want some of that too. And that's a very controlled kind of a situation as compared to if you have a big group, like for instance, the policemen in New York City, you got 40,000 people. That's a small town in itself kind of thing. So it's important to set up the process that will fit the situation that you're in, and to make sure that it's controllable so that you can manage and reach success. Because if it ends up with a failure, then if you try to do it a second time, guess what? People say, we've done this, seen that, done that, and no thanks, go away kind of thing. You have no credibility. So that's one thing. The second thing that I found interesting in there is when you look at the names, there are no new faces. So the question is, when you get into a situation, do you bring in a bunch of new people? Or do you live with the people that you got? Or to put the question in a different way, is the problem the process that's in place that needs to change? Or is it the people who are poor performers? And those are two different kinds of questions. So a while back, there was a fellow who wrote a book, and one of the phrases that he had in there is getting the right people on the bus. And it was very popular, but my reaction is that's a cop-out. Because if there is an issue, the first question that you got to look at, is it the way the system is working? And we've got to change the way we do things so that people can perform and do what they're supposed to do. And that's what you owe to everybody that's in place, until the point where after a certain time, then if there are low performers or non-performers, then obviously you've got to find an alternative. But until people have given an opportunity, it's not fair to make those kinds of decisions.
Let me see if I understand, Mike.
Yes.
It's easy to jump to the idea of replacing people.
Yes.
But you're your best advice is to look at working on the process and giving the people who are there an opportunity to make changes and be successful and get out of a rut. And
Right,
then if there are still, if once the process is working well, then if there are still people who are low performers, then look at replacing them. Am I
right,
right?
right. Yeah, the thing I found one time I was at the one US major corporation at headquarters, and I met one of the, I forget if it was an executive vice president for the major recruiting firm for executives. So he was a big mucky muck. And they had uh, helped to place an executive in the company that I was doing work with. And the guy was a total dud, and he was fired. It was within a year kind of thing. You know, it was just bad news. So I see the guy who's supposedly an expert in recruiting people and people evaluation and all that good stuff. I said, what happened? Hey, he said, it's always a 50-50. So that was not much of an endorsement kind of thing, but in some ways it's true, is you don't know until they see the performance. And you have people in the environment and in an environment that they can succeed. If the environment needs to be changed, then change the environment. And the other thing was that, which is surprising, is you set up the environment where people can succeed, they will surprise you. That was one of the philosophies of Toyota, by default rather than by design. At the beginning, they had very little money. You know, it's hard to think of them having little money today, but anyway, that was a case where people were reluctant to extend credit to them, so they had to find ways to operate. And one of the things that they did, or they couldn't do, is to hire a bunch of experts. So they had to depend on people, the people that they had. And guess what? They've got ideas. And they're familiar with the situation, and they know what there are alternatives. And if you listen to them, if you give them the opportunity, guess what? Wow, you know. Which brings to mind another story. I was in San Francisco at the company that was making food supplement, and they were making vitamin C pills, and somehow the pills were kind of not crumbling once in the marketplace. So the customers were complaining, say, hey, you will buy those things, and you know, those pills break very quickly, and fix it. So we have a meeting with a whole bunch of people. We've got a supervisor for the process, we've got the operator, we've got the marketing people, we've got all kinds of people in there, and including the engineers. And the engineers said, oh, we've got a solution. There's a German machine that we can buy, and it costs a small penny. And not only that, but the problem is it'll be 9 months before we can get the machine. 9 months we didn't have. So the operator says, you know, when I look at the thing and crumbling, one of the things I notice is that sometimes the powder is lumpy getting into the machine. And if we had a screen put between the machine and the feeder and break up those lumps so that everything would be powder and of a uniform density kind of thing, I think it would do the trick. So the engineers said, no, that's not, you know, it's not going to do it. So my question was very simple. How much does it cost to do what the operator is suggesting? So how long would it take? Well, it could be done in a weekend. So I said, well, you got 9 months versus over the weekend. Let's try the quick fix. And if that doesn't work, then we can move on. But that's, and guess what? The problem disappeared. So the point is that I'm trying to make is trust the people who live with the situation to come up with the solutions.
and they will surprise you.
Oh, every time, every time. One place locally over here, they were making about 250 units a day. And then we started talking about the things that they needed to do, and they came up with some things that they could do. And, within a month, they were up to 450, and with two less people. So, and it wasn't asking them to work harder. It's just getting rid of things that were impediments to make the thing better. So when I look at that, what I'm saying is the first thing is the first challenge is to say, how do we get started? And given that there is a progression, you've got to be founded or based on principles. So then I was starting to think, or say, okay, what are the principles that we gathered from Nehemiah? Well, it's surprising because I came up with 20 different aspects in the first 3 chapters that we've read up to this point. So it just shows you the deepness, the richness that there is in the text, and not only in there, but also in general, applicable in general.
That's amazing. Would you share those with me and I'll put them in the description for this video?
Yeah, I'll go through a bunch of them. The first one is to start with the leader, the mindset and the heart that the person has. And need to be fully aware of that. Second thing is the distinction between leader and leadership. Leader is the person, leadership is the process. So it's not an issue how smart or charismatic or how whatever the guy is. The question is more what kind of leadership he will exercise, what kind of process he's going to implement, what are the values going to be implemented. Next one after that is first-hand observation. Don't go with what somebody else told you. Go and see it. Because until you see it, then you won't have the real thing. I told you the story before about the time that we were at a plant and the quality control guy was saying, well, I do this and I do that. And I said, okay, show us. And then we said, reluctantly, he said, okay, I'll show you. Let's go. And then we had to walk 100 or 150 feet away to get the tools that he needed to do the test, give us some of the pieces that needed to do the testing, and then bring them back in the area to do the test. And the point is that if he has to do that, guess what? One, he has to wait until those guys don't use them. Two, he's got to make several trips to back to his place. and it's waste. So you have to see it, because to him, the guy, that was the way the job was. But what we have to assess as a leader is what's really involved. Another one is fortitude. Fortitude was the courage of facing difficult situations. And that's an issue with the leader, and it's an issue with everybody in the organization, really, is, can I say what I think? Is it safe? And a lot of times you don't want to say anything because it's not going to be well received. I remember one guy one time, another professor who had been in the military, and his attitude was, like in the military, don't create waves, just go with the flow. Because if you do make waves, guess what? It's not going to be well received. So his attitude is avoid it. Okay. So, and avoiding it doesn't face the issues. And, like the saying, the truth will set you free. Until you face the situation, guess what? Nothing's going to change. So,
Mike,
I'm sorry.
we're about out of time.
Okay, well, I'll
You have
save the
another
others for
couple
the
that
next
you'd like
time.
to share before we conclude?
No, I was just saying that it is surprising how rich the text is when you start looking at it, not in terms of a story and say, oh, yeah, okay, fine, but really understanding the dynamics, the people, the situation, the backgrounds, and see the interaction that takes place. And that's really what it is in general is people. One thought, for instance, in come to mind is like when we're talking about replacing people. One professional team in Vancouver hired a guy out of New York to become their star for the team. Okay, and the whole thing was going to turn the organization around. So the fellow who was the captain of the team was demoted, or not demoted, I don't know what you call it, with taking the title taken away and given to the new guy. And the following year, guess what? The performance was worse, not better. So the point is that it's the leadership that that makes and sets the tone for the organization, and to be aware of that and the principles that are involved that provide the girding that makes things happen or not happen. Anyway,
Thank you, Mike. This is leadership gold. I appreciate it. Look forward to the next time.
okay.